Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Nurgle in Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. According to your votes, this is the second best Chaos Monogod race in the game, behind Khorne, of course. Slaanesh and Tzeentch are way below both Khorne and Nurgle. Now, on one hand, I can perfectly understand exactly why Nurgle would be second best, because you do have Tamarkan, which is certainly an amazing legendary lord. He's got a lot of power, he's got a lot of unique mechanics, he's got some really cool dynamics over here through the chieftain system. Well, assuming you don't get frustrated trying to unlock them, but at least it does offer you a system to invest your time in theory. In practice, like with many things related to Nurgle, there are shortcomings. So let's go over the kind of issues that Nurgle has. Because let me be clear, you can enjoy Nurgle a great deal. The army roster in particular, between Chaos Warriors, Chosen of Nurgle, all the various demonic and mortal units, does make it pretty fun to use in battle. But on the campaign layer, which is what I'm talking about here, Nurgle is really weird, to say the least, and downright infuriating to deal with most of the time. For instance, let's consider a race design. Generally speaking, when you're playing a campaign, you do want the climate that you're dealing with in said campaign to be suitable. Now, on paper, Nurgle sounds like a great race. Most of the climates in the game are viable for them, with the exception of things like magical forest, mountain, desert, and ocean. Ocean doesn't matter, magical forest is very limited, so you're really just left with mountain and desert. Desert doesn't matter either, because you're not really going to be in a close proximity to that, so you're left with mountain. And that's where the first problem comes in, the big one. Because you see, every single Nurgle campaign, be it Tamarkan, Kugath, or Epidemius, have to deal with some level of mountain climate in their campaigns. And it's not just dealing with it in sense of proximity. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking here about their victory conditions being tied to the idea of fighting factions that are established in the mountain. So for instance, if you're playing Tamarkan, your short campaign victory condition is to deal with both Imgor and Greases. And that is a problem because all of the territory, or the vast majority of territory that they do have, is mountain climate. And beyond that, not just the climate problem that they do have, it's also the fact of navigation, because ogres and greenskins can use tunneling stands. You can't as Nurgle. So having an entire campaign dynamic where you're pushed towards fighting certain factions is just flat ridiculous. When the territory they take, that you might take from them, is rather useless. About this is that you can deal with this situation through diplomacy. Not through a victory condition, because the victory condition does require you to destroy these factions. But for instance, you can just vassalize, for instance, Grimgor as an example, for instance. Or, I can give him the challenge zone, just an example, vassalize him, and then unleash Grimgor on Greases. And you can do the same with, say, Malice Darkblade. You can do the same with different factions in a Chaos campaign or a Monogod campaign. But you can't achieve your victory condition unless you destroy these factions, which, again, you can defeat them. Like, you're very powerful as Tamarkan, for instance, but you're forced to fight a campaign that essentially nets you nothing if you're going for the territory that campaign wants you to deal with. That isn't ideal. I guess the best scenario is to vassalize Zaytan and give him the territory, but again, just not a great dynamic in a campaign to deal with. And then we further compound this specific issue with the way Nurgle settlements work. So, in order to understand that, we need barracks for units in general, of course, but also for vasalization, because that's how diplomacy works. Barracks are valuable. Well, the problem with Nurgle barracks and unit recruitment is, one, they take 4 turns to build, so just the building duration in itself is a very limiting factor, because it means even getting basic units from these barracks, and you're not going to be able to recruit willy-nilly, but even just getting a couple of these units becoming available for you to recruit is going to take 4 turns, and then you have that entire cycle. What's pretty frustrating about this is you can speed up said cycle, like you can use rush cycle building to get more units, but that requires you to use infections. So constructing barracks, military buildings requires infections, rushing the cycle requires infections, and then, of course, plagues require infections as well. And that's where we start talking about the big issue of Nurgle. See, Nurgle's unique mechanic is obviously in relation to plagues. You're encouraged quite heavily to use said plagues in a campaign. But the problem is a baseline plague costs 200 infections to make. Sure, you can cheapen that out if you're talking about certain legendary lords and all that, but that's the baseline. The thing is, plagues themselves, you can use them as a benefit for yourself, but if you're looking to use a plague to actually debuff your enemy, good luck with that. And in reality, most of the downsides are not even going to be felt by the AI. Think of this situation. You have a plague that reduces growth, reduces local recruitment capacity, and increases upkeep. The AI, even on normal difficulty, does not really care about these kind of downsides. The more useful downsides are things like affecting army capability in battle, but all the same, it's just a very limited situation. I mean, even attrition, think of this. Taking attrition on an army is a pretty nasty affair. And even the Skaven Plague, which, by the way, has a far higher chance of spreading and is far more difficult to get rid of, and does attrition and does a lot of things, even the Skaven Plague barely affects the AI. And the Skaven Plague is ridiculously so the most powerful plague in the entire game, by far. And that is where we get the problems. It's like you have the actual plague faction that isn't really good at doing plagues, partly because they're using the same resource that they need for basic military units. And between having multiple armies or having a debuff plague or buff debuffs, it's better to get the army, especially if said army involves a lot of chaos warriors. But beyond that, the plagues themselves are weaker. The only the only Nurgle campaign where plagues are actually good is Festus, and the reason is he doesn't use the same resource that he does for military recruitment and military production structures. Not that those matter for warriors of chaos, but he's not using the same resource for both plagues and military recruitment, which means Festus is by far in a way the best Nurgle campaign in the game, and that is not a joke. In fact, it might just be a better idea to get a mod that makes Tamarkan Warrior of Chaos, and believe it or not, that would actually be a better campaign than the shit he's dealing with between climate and infections and military production. Furthermore, you also have to use infections for the sake of research. Specific research trees or specific crucial points in research do require you to get to spend infections, quite a few of them. And it's not like you're getting thousands and thousands of infections per battle. You get very, very few of them. If it was a situation like, would say, slaves or laborers or thralls, sure, that would be a different affair, but doesn't work like that whatsoever. So you have a system of limitations where you take it slow. Now, the thing is, none of this is to say Nurgle is weak as a race. Far from it. Nurgle is extremely powerful. In fact, that's kind of the thing that makes it irritating. For instance, at tier 2, you can recruit a lot of different heroes from 2 different structures. Sure, they're garrison buildings, so they're useless outside of that. One takes 2 turns, the other takes 4 turns. Yes, thank you, CA, in terms of that discrepancy. But you can get 4 hero types: Cultist, Exalted Heroes, Exalted Sorcerer, all that kind, or Cast Sorcerer of Nurgle, and Plague Ridden. And these give you a lot of power, so you can make hero stacks and pair them up with just a good amount of Chaos Warriors. You end up being powerful, but it isn't especially fun to be pushed into the path of just using heroes. Using heroes is something many races can do, like play ogres, just spam heroes if you want, but when your army is not available because, well, recruitment, then you end up in a situation where you're just kind of pigeonholed down one path. Even Tamarkan, who does get more units, and we can talk about that in just a second, but even Tamarkan, who gets more units for chieftains, is still pigeonholed down that path. And the thing about Tamarkan's problem is, like, it takes him a while to get these chieftain units, because it's annoying that you have to unlock Kask, then you have to get him to level 7, and only then can you unlock any other chieftain. That is not a fun system to be using in a campaign. And that's the reason I think Nurgle ends up suffering. It's just all of these pacing issues, weird design philosophies. I feel with Nurgle, compared to, say, the Empire rework or the Dwarf rework, Creative Assembly was really attached to the idea. It's like, oh, we want infection buildings to work, which they never did. And still never do. I mean, think of this idea. Like, the system in itself sounds great in paper, because you get a couple of units of each type, so that means your armies end up being more varied than many other factions, until you realize that for a lot of your fucking campaign, your recruitment is going to look like this: Pestigores, Marauders with gray weapons, Forsaken, and then some Cast Warriors with gray weapons. You do eventually get more and more units as you get more barracks, but there are some things you just don't want to bother with. Like, why would you get the Bile Troll building when you can just get more Cast Warriors? Or, Exalted Plague Bearers, if that's your thing. Why, for instance, would you bother with the building that gives you, say, for instance, a Toad Dragon, when virtually everything else in that entire damn tree except Plague Ogres is just bloody useless compared to Rotten Knights, Chaos Knights, and many other different useful things that you can get through the Cavalry building chain. And that's really the problem. On paper, it has a lot of variety, different playstyles, and it would force you to actually use varied armies, which is fun. But it doesn't work in practice because of the limitations, construction times, cycle times, etc. You do have the benefit of being able to recruit anywhere in the world these units as they get added to the pool, but at the same time, by the time you get there, well, let me just put it like this. In either a Kugaf or Tamarkan campaign, your campaign is done the moment you take Sarnagrund. Once you've done that, there's nothing that's going to be able to stop you. Simple as that. And also, when you consider the vassalization angle, the moment you get a couple of powerful vassals, irrespective of victory conditions or irrespective of who they are, GG, well played. So it's the combination of various core game issues, the way vassalization, climate work, combined with specific issues of Nurgle. See, the game does have issues, undeniably so, but what makes a good race good, like dwarves, is not so much how powerful they are, but when they push a campaign beyond the baseline of what the game can offer. And Nurgle doesn't do that. In fact, quite the opposite. Nurgle makes the core systems that are broken even worse. And we haven't even talked about sieges, which, yes, having a chaos faction that has limited ability in siege does suck. At least with Nurgle, you do have a powerful auto-resolve army, for what that's worth. But similar to Slaanesh, though it is better than Slaanesh, you do have a problem with sieges. It is better than Slanesh and Siege in the sense that Slanesh and Siege just basically get reduced to spam Chaos Warriors and Sangors, basically, and Forsaken of Siege. But yeah, Chaos Warriors of Slanesh, Sangors, Forsaken, Chaos Warriors of Siege, Chosen for those two, and that's essentially your campaign. It isn't a particularly fun playstyle. You do have more variety, and you will be forced to use more units in a campaign, or you'll just spam heroes. Not the best in the world compared to Khorne. No joke. You look at Khorne, like, you don't have this stupid, silly limitation on unit recruitment, but Khorne inherently pushes you towards using a wider variety of units. I mean, you could just recruit Chaos Warriors with swords, with axe and shield, but what's the fun in that? I mean, sure, there's recruitment tier issues for many of the fun things in a Khorne campaign, but Khorne campaigns work. Of course, the fact that Khorne steamrolls every other race in the game is more of a problem of how the pacing of the game is handled and how Creative Assembly thinks they can get everything for everyone. And one of the things I would say about Total War 4K, one of the things I'm really excited about, is they finally come to realize you cannot make every race or everything work for everyone in the same damn campaign map. You can't have both short campaigns and long campaigns. You can't just have systems that are incredibly rewarding in the short term and then long term when difficulty is all over the place, climate is all over the place, pacing is all over the place. So we'll see on that. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out.